In this video, I'm making habitats for Cryolophosaurus, Sinosauropteryx, Deinonychus, Pachycephalosaurus, Pachyrhinosaurus, and a walkthrough habitat with Polacanthus. There's a lot of work to do in this Jurassic World Evolution 2 build, so let's get started. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for another building episode on Mini Mantah Corp Island. And I also want to thank all of the suggestions that you guys keep sending in the comments, helping me out with like dinosaur selection and stuff. And for this episode I went with species that, I don't normally give that much attention. For example, the Polacanthus, for which we are building this walkthrough habitat. Really what I did for this episode was I just filled in the spaces that were left in the taiga section. I just basically built the habitat, took a screenshot of the finished habitat, and then I looked through you guys' comments to see, okay, so what kind of species do I think would work well here in combination with what you guys want? So that's sort of how these habitats came to be and how they came to be populated. So for this habitat, I really just went in building something knowing, okay, it's gonna have some sort of herbivore at some point, and it's going to have a walkthrough situation. Not in the sense that our guests can actually access it, but we're using the gate on the guest path trick to sort of pretend that guests can get in here. And also what I decided to do this time around, normally when I do a walkthrough habitat, I at least, lay down some path. And I decided not to do that this time. This time around, if guests want to come into this habitat, they would have, complete freedom to walk around and go up to the Polacanthus. We're just gonna pretend that those are, gentle, just kind of like giant tortoises, just very, very calm. No lawsuit waiting to happen whatsoever. We're saving lawsuits for the Dunkleosteus habitat from last week. But yeah, that's sort of different about this habitat, I suppose. And I'm so looking forward to the tour. Obviously, we're going to be walking through this habitat, but we're going to be walking through the entire park, all of the 4 very different sections, all of the 4 different biomes. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. It's obviously going to be a couple of weeks down the line. There's still plenty of work that needs to be done here. But already as I'm building, I'm looking forward to it. So now we're moving on to the next habitat, or rather the guest surrounding area of the next habitat. But this is where we're going to be housing the Deinonychus. So this is the small habitat in between the Dunkleosteus tank and our Uteranus ice court. It was just an awkward little space. But, I managed to fit a habitat in there, and I think Deinonychus, it was a pretty fun pick for that one. And again, it's a species that I don't use a lot. I think it's a species a lot of us don't use a lot. So yeah, it was fun to bring in the tadpoles for once. You can see me struggling right now to fit buildings on this little area. The terrain constraints are going absolutely crazy. I managed to fit a shop there. I'm actually going to be exchanging that for a zip line later. Yeah, it's just really frustrating that you have quite a bit of real estate here, honestly, and you just can't use it because of the terrain constraints. That does grind my gears, to be honest. And obviously, if you're building your own park, at that point, you're going to mess with the terrain. You're going to mess with the coastline to make that work. But since, we're confined to the very strict shape of Mantah Corp Island to sort of keep that gimmick, I suppose, I can't do anything to change the coastline. But, if you're ever running into that issue yourself, why make it hard on yourself? Don't be me. Don't do as I do as I say. And I say just make it easier for yourself and fiddle with the coastline a bit so you can fit more buildings in there. But yeah. I decided to go with a zip line instead of a shop, and I'm also adding a viewing gallery, so this little nub of path over there has some attractions, has some motivation for guests to be there, both the in-game AI as well as if this was a real world place, give people a reason to go to that little outcropping of the park. So the habitat that I'm currently outlining, this is where our Pachyrhinosaurus and Pachycephalosaurus are gonna go. Just a fun mix, purely for the sake of the name. Now, Pachyrhinosaurus was requested many times during the past video, so I think it's safe to say it's the most requested species for the taiga area. And then I went with Pachycephalosaurus, which is not very often requested, but I liked how those names fit together. And again, a part of how I went into, picking common suggestions from you guys was really looking at people who suggested things that I don't normally go for. And Pachycephalosaurus is definitely one of those species that I don't normally go for. So in front of the Pachy habitat, is just what we're going to call it, is a circular habitat that's going to house the Sinosauropteryx, just using, as I do, a lot of circular shapes, but I also think it helps tie the overall design of the park together. You know, the ice court inspired habitat is obviously this big circle lined with monorail, and there's some path elements surrounding the Archelon glitched habitat that also incorporates circles. So at this point, circles is just not only a staple of my channel, ironically, but also it's a visual element that is repeated several times in the park. So I think that, sticking with something like that helps tie things together. I'm just struggling a little bit to fill in this how do I phrase this? I struggle to line this habitat, this perimeter properly. You see me sort of second guessing myself and shopping around for other items. Obviously I knew that Sinosauropteryx was going to go in here, so I was a little worried about them potentially escaping. But so far so good. I put them in at the end of the build, and while doing, all of the shots, they haven't escaped. So job sufficiently done, I suppose. Now, something that I like doing when I'm lining a habitat is that, whether it's with decorations or with fence, honestly, sometimes I like obstructing the view a little bit. What I really love is, if we would have like proper fences with windows, that would be cool. But you can sort of create that same effect by alternating concrete fencing with wire fencing, create like small areas of wire fencing to create a window, quote unquote. And what I also like doing is obstructing the view sometimes with rocks and trees and stuff like that. So you can see me doing that right here. There are certain areas where, if you're walking along the path, you can't really look into that circular habitat. And that is to direct your view elsewhere and to create, little surprise moments, I suppose. That feeling of walking around a corner and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, what do I see over there? It feels like exploring stuff, which is, I think, a fun way to go about walking through a park if it was in real life. That feeling that you're exploring things. You're not seeing everything all at once. You really have to look left, look right, and have these surprising moments. All right. So I've managed to circumvent the terrain constraints to line that path on the other side as well. Sometimes you just have to get creative with your item selection in order to work around that. And yeah, lining path is definitely, it's a thing for me. I'm comfortable calling it an obsession at this point, but I just feel like an unlined path looks naked, it looks unfinished, and that's why I really hope that one day, whether it be Jurassic World Evolution 2 or potentially someday Jurassic World Evolution 3, I really just want us to get low fences so we can easily add like a bit of a curb, a little bit of a stupidity barrier, as I like to call it, around our paths. In the meantime, I've moved on to this tiny aviary where I'm gonna be housing Dimorphodon. I felt like those were a really fun pick for the taiga section because, they have their little fluffy coats, so they look a little cozier than some of our other flying reptiles. And also, it's such a small aviary that I did want to limit myself to a small species. And I just decorated that really simply. Something, it's not making it easy for me to narrate, but something I do while building is I do hop around quite a bit. So, after the aviary, I went back to the Polacanthus habitat, and now I'm randomly placing a restroom here. That is how my building process is. I'll have like a random realization while working on one thing, like, oh, I should add something over here. Like, oh, I should I should add a restroom in that little awkward space that I have left, and then I go do that, and then I think, oh, I should add a Jurassic Park gate to the Polacanthus habitat, and then I go do that. You know, stuff like that. So it's not the easiest for narration, but it is just sort of the natural flow to park building. And I hope that with this new structure of how we're doing, how we're gonna be completing Mini Mantah Corp Island with these like bigger speed build episodes, I hope that my sort of all over the place style of building can just, you know, be its own thing, do its own thing with the best results, rather than really limit myself to just working on one habitat, one area. I really hope that giving myself just this total free reign to bounce around is going to make the build even better, even though I guess it makes for slightly messier episodes. But if you're still watching, I really appreciate it. I hope you're on board with that. Thank you for watching. If you are enjoying it, please give the video a like. You know, that helps out so much. Alright, so what I'm doing right now, I guess we're sort of turning like this little sliver of land into a bit of a pier. You might imagine that perhaps pleasure yachts or something like that, you know, recreational vessels dock there for guests to explore a little bit of the surrounding ocean or whatever. Like, I felt like I had to do something with that awkward strip of land over there. And of course, as I said, lining all the path with all the rocks. What is slightly disconcerting, you might have already noticed, the park is closed while I am building. Now the frame rate is still relatively decent, even when the park is open, but we're definitely reaching a point where I'm realizing, okay, we're nowhere near finished by the time this park is finished. Yeah, the frame rates will definitely suffer. And especially near the end of this build, doing certain things like placing down buildings, placing down lagoons, there is a definite drop in frame rate. So already I am seeing that my park building style is, again, not compatible with the optimization or lack thereof of this game. I really don't... Like, sometimes I see people say, oh, I have no issue whatsoever. Like, I build a park, like, I fully cover the square map without issue. And I just, like, do you work for NASA? What kind of system do you run your game on? Because, honestly, I have a really good PC. And if I build parks the way I like building parks, with a ton of detail, as you can see, I really can't fill the entire square map. I mean, Mini Mantah Corp Island is probably a quarter, maybe not even that, but let's say a quarter of the total, like, square footage, quote-unquote, of the square map. And we're not even fully decorated yet, and I'm already seeing, like, the performance drop, so yeah. I don't know, maybe people have a different definition of covering an entire square map. I will say I'm obviously not the average park builder. I do place a lot of planters, I acknowledge that. Alright, so I've hopped on back to the aviary section. Or rather, again, the guest section surrounding the aviary. And I initially had a hotel there. I do need more hotels, so I'm gonna put the hotel there instead. But I had the hotel on the other side. It would have been overlooking the Pachyrhino habitat, or the Pachy habitats, just Pachy. But yeah, I decided to move it over here so I could just do a nice guest section on that other end. So to the... Oh god, I'm moving around. Below us right now. Oh, and now at the like top right. Oh, and now below us. That's where the Cryolophosaurus habitat is gonna go. And you see what I mean, right? With me hopping around. So now I'm actually working on that guest section that I mentioned earlier. So that's gonna be overlooking the Pachy habitat instead of the hotel that was initially gonna go there. I just didn't really like the combination of a hotel next to the zipline building. That's honestly, that's just how that came to be. That's, I just didn't like that combo, so I was like, okay, I need to switch that up, so it's gonna be a guest section instead. using a lot of these wall pieces to hide like the utilitarian look of the DFW buildings. Now, if you recall, to sell the idea that this park, you know, is 4 different biomes, 4 different styles, I do force myself to, you know, use certain buildings in certain sections of the park. And for the taiga section, that is predominantly the DFW buildings, with some exceptions, of course, like the hotels and stuff. But the DFW buildings are very utilitarian, so they're not very park-esque. So that's why I hide a lot of that with those wall pieces. So the idea I had for this little cutout area is to turn it into kind of like a mini outdoor museum exhibit sort of thing. I always like doing little cutouts to avoid path sections becoming too overly large. And normally what you could just do is fill that up with foliage and stuff like that. But, you know, in the taiga section, I feel like I've already gone a little bit overboard with the trees, but you know, I love my greenery, I love adding that stuff. But for this time, for this little cutout, I was like, okay, you know what might be more fun? Instead of like filling it with foliage, let's put these 3 skeletons here. We have John Hammond, we have some amber rocks. So yeah, it's like a little museum section, outdoor museum section that our guests can walk through as they walk around the aviary. I thought that was pretty fun and something that you might want to incorporate in your own parks as well. If you have like a little awkward space left, turn it into a bit of a mini museum. You can even use the animatronic / hologram glitch that I covered in a short this week. You know, there's some fun stuff that you can do with that, definitely. Not every little bit of land needs to be dedicated to a dinosaur, is what I'm saying. I know, that's a scary suggestion, very controversial suggestion, but you know, sometimes it's nice to just do something different. Okay, so I've moved back to the Pachy habitat. I'm adding a lot of rocks. I really like using the Mediterranean rocks here because, you know, they look white, they look snow-covered, and I'm mixing it up with some of the other rocks, the tempered rock, for example, to get like a little bit of a color mix in there, and also because, frankly, I didn't use the white rocks earlier in the build, so to sort of tie it all together. As always, I'm adding a tiny bit of terrain elevation differences in this habitat. It's not a lot, but it's a little bit, and I think it goes a long way. You know, this way the path gives a tiny bit of an elevated perspective into the habitat. And there's like a little bit of a hump along the coastline there. Some terrain paints to make it look a little bit less white, I suppose. I will say this taiga section, it was kind of rough for me to work on. And I do feel like I've kind of failed a little bit. I really didn't want to use as many trees as I did. But honestly, it's just really dull to not use a lot of trees when decorating a habitat. But even with guest areas, like we have so limited decorative pieces that really you need trees as a decorative item to fill in like those blank spaces. So it's not as barren as I initially wanted it to look to really differentiate it from the other biomes. Obviously the snow goes a long way in doing that anyway. But yeah, I am happy with how it turned out, even though it's not really as, yeah, like I said, as barren as I had in mind. But I'm also happy that it's finished. I guess I'm most looking forward to now finishing the temperate section. The desert section I'm a little bit apprehensive about because same with taiga, my intention is to not go overboard with the trees. Stay tuned for that. It's gonna be even more rocks, probably. I do have some ideas for how to fill the desert section, so I am looking forward to that. I hope you are as well. In the meantime, I'm working on the Cryolophosaurus habitat. This one, I did force myself to use trees minimally. You can see that I couldn't resist entirely, but it's quite minimal. There's just like 5 or something. So, you know, I call that personal growth. And after just saying that, I just realized, yeah, I added more trees there. Anyway, I do think it looks really nice. And again, you just need trees to make it look nice and full and decorated. Because honestly, you know, what else are you gonna do? So for the Deinonychus habitat, we have like 2 windows, again, like that windowed look looking into the habitat on either side. And I considered letting guests, you know, look from one side to the other, but I actually decided to split it up with a rock formation and again, a lot of foliage, so that, you know, both windows have a very different perspective. You can't see across. You can only see like the backdrop of that rock wall, and you're just gonna be, you know, waiting to see if you catch a glimpse of the tadpole Deinonychus walking on through. As we're nearing the end of this episode, and you can see me looking around, seeing where like, oh, I missed the spot over here. For example, I realized that I needed to line this path. But yeah, as I'm doing that, I really want to invite you guys to keep coming on through with your suggestions for dinosaur species and habitat ideas. That's really one of my favorite things about these weekly builds. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys chipping in with your creativity, and I hope you will continue to do so. And that, you know, it can sort of be like a give and take. You know, you guys give me a suggestion, and I build something that hopefully will in turn inspire you guys again. And yeah, I really hope that that's what the series provides. So keep coming on through with those suggestions. Specifically this time around, give suggestions for what you want to see in the desert area of the park, because that's where we're going to go next week. I don't think I can finish the desert section in one video like what we're doing here with the taiga section. The taiga section really just had some small areas that were still left open, you know, some small puzzle pieces to fill in. The desert area still has quite a large chunk of real estate that is still wide open. So yeah, coming through with ideas that you have. I think I'm toying with the idea of doing an aviary, but doing some dinosaurs in the aviary. And maybe create like a slightly different biome within the desert biome. I don't know, is that like biome inception? Is that a little too crazy? Is that a little too much? Let me know in a comment down below. Like, let's bounce some ideas off each other here. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I am happy with how this series is progressing, even though it wasn't the plan to do it in speed builds. I loved building this. It was late at night. I was doing my insomniac thing, but it's just so nice to just, you know, completely focus on the building and just completely go into that headspace where nothing exists except the serotonin release when you place a path perfectly or you line a path with planters. I just had such a good time building. So I'm already really looking forward to continuing work on the desert section. And I hope that the videos as a result, you know, don't suffer too much. I hope that you're still enjoying the ride and getting your inspiration. I'm really just adding some finishing details here, and then the taiga section is done. So yeah, I'm very excited about that, and excited to be moving on to the next section. Here we go, the completed taiga area of Mini Mantah Corp Island in Jurassic World Evolution 2. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Now, I will say that my park builds aren't built for this aerial perspective anymore. You know, there's no giant path art to make you go, wow. Nowadays, I build my parks for the ground perspective. So that's why I'm really looking forward to showing you guys everything in this park from the guest view, because I think that's where it's really gonna shine. You know, something like this. We're gonna be walking into the Polacanthus habitat here and visiting them, walking under the Jurassic Park gates. And yeah, this is something I'm just really looking forward to. And this is nowadays how I build my parks, with this perspective in mind, as opposed to how I built in Jurassic World Evolution 1. I do think that it makes for less spectacular builds at first glance. You know, with that aerial overview, the park doesn't give that, you know, that punchy whoa. But when you get down to it and explore it the way guests would explore it, the way they would in real life, that's really where you know, all of the detail is gonna come in. And I hope that that's gonna show once we do get to the tour in a couple of weeks. I want to thank you so much for joining me for this building episode. I hope that you did enjoy it. If you did, give the video a like. As always, that helps me out so much. I look forward to next week. I hope you do as well. Again, final call. Please share your ideas in a comment down below for the desert area that we're going to be working on next. And I hope I will see you there. Alright, thank you so much for watching, liking, subscribing, and until next time, enjoy the game.